Okay, we are rolling. Champions of Champions boxing talk here. Well, I'm going to talk about a variety of subjects in this particular video. So I hope you've got a patient ear. And I think it'll need to be a patient one because it's important, some of the things I'm going to say here. Now, I'm an absolute nobody in boxing. I'm a fan just like, many others. I analyse and I get things right and I get things wrong. But I do know what I'm seeing when I see it. Now, let's talk about first George Groves v. Chris Eubank Jr. Have I got egg on my face this weekend? Eubank gets absolutely schooled by George Groves. That's number one. And I picked Eubank to win. In the United States, I picked Devin Alexander to beat Victor Ortiz. And I did score it 7-5 for Devin Alexander. But the judges called it a draw. Smack in the face, number 2. The only one I got right was Danny Garcia to beat Brandon Rios. But I didn't get it right in the style I thought I'd get it right. I thought Danny Garcia would have Rios out there in 5 rounds. And I thought Rios really doesn't have anything to offer boxing anymore. Boy, was I wrong. Rios, his game plan in terms of attacking, was better against Danny Garcia than Eubank Jr.'s attempt against George Groves. I'll tell you for why. You watch Danny Garcia v. Brandon Rios. Brandon Rios is using a double jab to get into range. He's cutting the ring off, things like that. Of course, it was a tremendous finish in the end from Danny Garcia. But in terms of an effort and actually thinking about what you're doing in terms of your style in the ring and how to apply it, Brandon Rios can hold his head up high, right? Despite the defeat. He was double jabbing, he was throwing volume, he was coming in at times and making Danny Garcia feel uncomfortable, making Danny Garcia throw shots and counter him hard. And of course, the stoppage happened not through a big right hook, or shall I say not through a big left hook, which is basically what Danny Garcia really hurt Amir Khan with. It come from a right hand. So, in a sense, Rios was making Danny Garcia think in the ring. The perception I had before the fight was Rios was going to come forward, take a bunch of shots, and be broken down. It wasn't a case of him being broken down. I didn't see that the finish was near. It was a shot out of the blue, and Brandon Rios, well, I think they did the right job. He's a warrior. He would have carried on, no doubt about it, but his corner and the referee, Kenny Bayliss, stopped the fight, even though he'd rose to his feet. But I thought he'd be broken down and taken out. But he was just taken out, but he was in the fight. Actually give him a few rounds in the fight. Now, Brandon Rios didn't win any rounds v. Pacquiao and Bradley back in the day, but he did win rounds, in my view, against Danny Garcia, and there was a few he was competitive in. Why? Because he had a game plan. Double jab, cut the ring off, know you can go in against Danny Garcia because you don't face that speed of the flash footwork that you get with Bradley and Pacquiao. So he knew when to attack and how to attack. Maybe a bit too much headshots that Rios was going for in the fight. I think he should have gone to the body much more. But still, I could see Brandon Rios is not associated with being a thinker's fighter, but there was more thinking in his game plan than there was in Chris Eubank Jr.'s game plan v. George Groves. Now, on to George Groves and Chris Eubank. Egg on my face, as I said. The reason I predicted Chris Eubank Jr. to beat George Groves was his pace, his combinations, pressure. I presumed, and this is a big mistake on my behalf, never presume something until you've seen it in practice. I presumed that Chris Eubank Jr. would work on head movement and closing in the space. Again, what Brandon Rios was actually doing. Double jabbing. Closing the distance. Getting inside the pocket on George Groves. And if he was at range, not throwing swings, but long punches and not single punches. Because if you try and single punch with George Groves, centre of the ring at a distance that George Groves is comfortable at, he will pepper and tattoo you all night. And that's exactly what more or less happened. There was no head movement. There was no double jabbing. There was no fast pace at the start, which is exactly what Eubank Jr. did against Billy Joe Saunders. He gave the first 5 rounds away. And the reason why he was able to finish competitively via Billy Joe really boiled down to this. He could walk through Billy's power a little bit. But he could not via George Groves. And I think he was weary of that. All the suspicion that Chris Eubank Jr. was having, shall we say, bad sparring. George Groves' team, I think, mentioned it. I thought was absolute nonsense. But I'll tell you something. Chris Eubank Jr. did not lose that fight in George Groves in the ring that night. He did in terms of officialness and on the record, but he's lost that in training camps. Camps, I say. Because there are certain fundamentals and a sense of technicianship which Chris Eubank Jr. is lacking. And you know something? He's 28 years of age. And he looks to me like he needs to start all over again. He needs to find a new team. I was thinking Virgil Hunter. Now, the criticism Floyd Mayweather a while back had about Virgil Hunter was, he's never boxed professionally. Well, let me tell you something. Amir Khan, Andre Ward, they look a far better trained in terms of tactics by Virgil Hunter, who is not a boxer, than Chris Eubank Jr. does with the legendary Chris Eubank. That guy is a boxing legend, his father, but he can't train. We see it in football. Great players often fail to be great managers and coaches. I think we've got a prime example here. Chris Eubank Sr. has done wonders for his son in terms of economics build-up and so forth. He's made him for life. But in terms of getting down to the basics and the nitty-gritties of boxing, he's not doing that much. I'll tell you, usually when you get a rich child from a rich father, you end up with a child that develops skills but has no heart when it comes to the trenches, and they fall apart because they've never experienced life. With Chris Eubank Jr., it's the opposite. He has, to me, got a heart. He has, to me, got work rate. He does keep himself in condition, but he ignores the skills. And as I said, people often don't associate attacking fighters with being thinkers and having a craft to their style of fighting. Let me tell you something. They are the true craftsmen of the sport. You know why? Because when you're an attacking fighter, you face all the traffic when you're constantly coming forward. All the volume is coming back at you, right? I could see Ricky Hatton looking baffled at ringside. The look on Ricky's face was as if to say, Chris, what are you doing? You remember how Ricky Hatton used to get on the inside? He wouldn't just walk straight forward. He'd come from the left, he'd come from the right, he'd have a a corkscrew jab, short, effective, he'd jab his way in, he wouldn't throw all his weight on every punch, they'd be like feeling punches, then he'd turn and then bam to the body, things like that. There was a genuine method to Ricky Hatton and his attacking style. There was to Nigel Benn, right? Ricky Hatton, you watch the first couple of rounds when Ricky Hatton faces Floyd Mayweather. And Ricky Hatton does not play checkers with Floyd Mayweather, or chess, should I say, for that matter. Ricky Hatton does not stand at, say, mid-range, outside the pocket, and try and box with the mighty boxer. Oh no. He's thinking of 1,000,001 ways to get inside on Floyd. And he does it. He cuts the ring off on the legendary footwork of Floyd Mayweather. The problem is, Floyd is really good on the inside. It wasn't detriment to Ricky Hatton's attempt. It was credit to how Floyd Mayweather deals with Hatton once he gets there. But Ricky was thinking. As the fight wore on, okay, he got picked off, but that's against a guy at that time that is up there with the very best of all time in any weight classes. Costa Zoo, Ricky's big win. How many double jabs did you see? He smothered Costa Zoo. He didn't let Costa Zoo get full purchase on his shots. Ricky was on his chest all night long. If Ricky Hatton would have waited 4 rounds to try and get on Costa Zoo's chest, he wouldn't have made it to the 4th round, let me tell you. We had the opposite here. Chris Eubank sort of letting George Groves, who is a great boxer, and when I say letting, I don't really mean letting. He didn't have the answers. He didn't have a double jab. He wasn't coming in at angles. He was walking straight forward, and his footwork looked hesitant, because once he tasted George Groves' jab, which head movement would have negated that a little bit, he sort of went into a shell until the latter stages. He finished strong in the 12th, but the fight was won by then by George Groves. Now, Nassim Hamed was very critical of Chris Eubank Jr. Let me just say this. I don't think Chris Eubank Jr. should give it up. I'm going to give credit to Benji's boxing here. Chris Eubank Jr., without having all the skill, managed to go 12 rounds with George Groves there. There are guys who have got more technical skill and more technical savvy and awareness than Chris Eubank Jr. that have been knocked out by George Groves. Right? That's what I believe. He's only had 3 fights at super middleweight, has Chris Eubank Jr. If he changes his team and trains like it's his first fight, trains like he's a novice, just trying to get his first break in the sport, with that style of hunger, he has a chance. The worry is his ego. Right? When you're hearing stories about a guy who's training himself, it doesn't bode well for me. I'll tell you for why. Trainers are in the sport for a reason. They are. It's not how you lose, it's how you bounce back. And if you keep coming back with the same methods, then you're going to be remembered as the guy that just could not adjust. And I'm not talking about one particular fight. The Billy Joe Saunders, I believed, was a one-off. But it's proved here that at the moment, Chris Eubank Jr. has a stylistic problem against guys who can control the pace with a jab and from distance, like Billy Joe Saunders, and even worse with George Groves because of the power. There was knockdowns in that fight as well, at least one, He was knocked down, Chris Eubank Jr., in the second round. He was caught by, I think, a short left hook on the inside by George Groves. And here's another thing. He sparred with George Groves. I don't get why some of this stuff has not rubbed off on Chris Eubank Jr. You see, silly me was presuming that because time passes and you get more experiences that you develop. Well, if you've got the wrong attitude, you don't. You don't. And I could see developments in George Groves. He's probably not as sharp as he used to be, George. He's probably not. He's a little bit more cautious in a good way than he used to be. He didn't get in the firefight that I predicted when Chris Eubank Jr. came forward. George Groves, against the ropes, kept tying him up. That's real knowledge, and that's a grasp of true experience. Stuff that George Groves was not doing against Carl Froch. But here's the thing. Chris Eubank Jr. did not know what to do once George Groves was clinching him. He was wrestling him on the ropes, getting frustrated, throwing wild hooks and swings. If you are in the ring with a Gennady Golovkin, he would put your head at the top of the arena swinging like that. It's because George Groves is a technician and didn't really commit to the punch that he didn't take Chris Eubank Jr. out. But George Groves is a handful, even if you do have good fundamentals. Even if you are a very, very sound fighter, you've got all you can handle when you fight George Groves. He's one of the best super middleweights in the world, if not the right now. So, for Chris Eubank Jr. to go in there and kind of fight George Groves as though he's fighting anybody else, I can't... Can you honestly, anyone, tell me, what was his game plan? Could you see an effort? Again, I said, I've seen a pattern of game plan from Brandon Rios v. Danny Garcia, but I could see nothing with Chris Eubank Jr. He looked like he was going to go in there, attempt to muscle George Groves late. I said, didn't I, in my breakdown, that in the rounds Chris Eubank loses, which was a lot of them, but the early rounds that he loses, he's got to make George Groves feel the pace, even though he's lost the round. But he didn't. It was at a slow pace. And if you're fighting at a slow pace, George Groves' hand speed, jab, and footwork is going to lead you a merry-go-round. And that's exactly what happened. And he didn't have the wherewithal at the end to finish the fight against a one-armed man. The instincts seemed to be lacking. He looked like a very fit man, very well conditioned, but just didn't have the tools. Didn't have the tools at all. But it can be mended, but it needs to start now. Because he's years from what I saw in terms of fundamentals, he's years behind. Where is a jab? Where is it? And if you're not going to use a jab, there was nothing clever, like he wasn't sort of craftily bringing George Groves forward to counter Groves or anything like that. He was the one just walking forward, taking the jab, but not throwing any punches. And again from range, if Chris Eubank Jr. would have thrown hooks from range against George Groves would have evaded them and smack. But single shots v George Groves, that's his game. That's what George Groves does. And Chris Eubank Jr. doesn't have a jab to match George Groves. Many people think that George Groves' jab is better than Carl Froch's, but Carl Froch can at least put it out there to present a rangefinder for him to get in range and attack. He can feel his way in with the jab, right? And he doesn't... Carl Froch... When did you see Carl Froch smothering his own punches? Chris Eubank Jr. was doing this all night long, and Froch does have a jab. In terms of technicianship, Carl Froch is a million miles ahead of Chris Eubank Jr. So, I'm embarrassed. I'm not embarrassed for Chris Eubank Jr. because he did what he could with what he had, but what he had was nowhere near enough, and I'm talking about miles away. But guys that picked him, like Anthony Crawler, ex-world champion, Carl Froch, Prince Nazim Hamed, Nigel Benn, these folks have made my life a little bit more comfortable, because when I watched that fight within a couple of rounds, I was thinking, my God, man, have you just turned to the casuals of casual? Have you become a casual in 36 minutes? Because this fight is not going anywhere near to what the level of my breakdowns usually are. I have lost fights before and predictions before. But I have seen in fights stuff going on that are sort of similar to my breakdown, but I didn't see anything like this in that fight. So he's got to have the courage to say to his father, look, Dad, it's been great, but I need to go to America or wherever, get Virgil Hunter, somebody, and start working on these fundamentals now. And when he faces an opponent who is maybe not a George Groves-esque level, I want to see a jab working. I want to see head movement working. Because Chris Eubank's energy, speed and reflexes is fantastic. And his body strength, you know, considering he's only been up at super middleweight 3 times now. That's all there. But it's no good having the best presents on Christmas if the door to your house is locked and you don't have the key. Chris Eubank has got the presents. He needs the key to get in the door. And that's the jab, the head movement, working some angles. And here's the thing. People are saying, well, he's... particularly Prince Nazim Hamed, he was embarrassed, I could tell. But I disagree with Naz. Don't give up yet. Manny Pacquiao was lost. He's gone back to the drawing board. Right? Manny Pacquiao at one time was considered a one-handed fighter. But you know what Manny did? He let Freddie Roach train that right hand, and it's become a super weapon for him. You know, when he threw that very, very sharp, powerful right hook against Antonio Margarito, he rocked him to the core. He didn't have that punch a few years ago. That's why he lost to Eric Morales the first time. But Manny gritted his teeth, and Manny Pacquiao was way better then than Chris Eubank is now. No doubt about it. But what I'm saying is, Manny didn't let defeat deter him. He didn't let critics deter him. Even after the Floyd Mayweather fight, he became world champion again. Chris Eubank has got to have that sort of attitude. And Manny Pacquiao is a star. But he knows that Freddie Roach and his team at the time really cared for him. Wanted to make him the best fighter he could be. So Manny listened. And Manny practiced. Before long, he was knocking opponents out. And they were more or less landing on the moon when he hit him with that left hook. Right? Manny had less things to work on than Chris Eubank Jr. Chris Eubank Jr. to me has a lot of work to do. But if he knuckles down, he gets a few fights that aren't too dangerous for him. He has to put these in practice. I want to see it in motion. I want to see that jab. I want to see the head movement. I want to see intelligence when he's chasing a guy with footwork down. I want to see him cut the ring off. He wasn't doing that for Groves either. He was wrestling with him. I want to see less of that. I want to see good spacing on the inside. I want to see body shots. right? And I don't want to see them shots smothered. Because honestly, I know people on YouTube that could give him better fundamentals than his current team have. Literally. I do. I know him personally. Right? But he's got to do it. He's got some natural tools and talent. But the greatest talent of all is doing the things over and over again that the majority get bored with. Right? A true talent is hard work on the right things. And working hard on your weaknesses. Knowing your strengths, but fixing them weaknesses. He needs to start now. Or he will never be simply the best. Or he'll never be even one of the best. He'll always be that guy if he doesn't fix things now that has a name. But when an elite fighter needs a win, they'll pick him. Because they know they could school him. But I think he's got better in his potential than that. I think he has got the ability to be a world champion. I'm not saying that he's going to be the be end and all end and the man, pound for pound king and all this stuff. I don't really think he could be the best middleweight at the moment or the best super middleweight, because these things take years to put in your boxing DNA. But he's capable of a world championship, surely. And the IBO title, I'm afraid, is not a world title. I don't know why he was convincing himself all this time that he was the world champion. It's a minor title, son. It's a minor one. George Groves had the major one. And George Groves fought like a major fighter. Because that's what George Groves is. Did I underestimate George Groves? No, George Groves has got what he's got. I always knew that. But maybe I overestimated what Chris Eubank has. I'd never seen him do certain things that I was predicting he was going to do. But I said he was going to do him. That was very silly on my part. Right? But I wasn't the only one. People are saying casuals predicted Eubank to win. That's easy saying that after the event. But there were some damn legends that predicted Eubank to win. Chris's old foe, as I said. Nigel Benn, that guy's a legend. Carl Froch is a legend. Nassim Hamed is a legend. Anthony Crawler, superb fighter. One of the best lightweights in the world. Was world champion a couple of fights ago. Matthew Macklin has been in there with a few names. He predicted it. So, egg on my face, but even more egg on Eubank's face. But this can be a good thing if he takes it in the right context. But simmer that ego. Simmer that ego. Okay, show us the ego. In front of the cameras. Pose, do all your stuff. You are the showman. But behind the scenes in the gym, humble yourself and knuckle down and study the greats to try and be great. Because that's what greats do. Whether they tell you that or not, that is the case. We could see Roberto Duran and Nigel Benn and Ricky Hatton, can't we? We could see Tommy the Hitman Hearns and other fighters. You have to do the same, and you're not your dad. You can't do things the way your dad do them. Find your way. So, I'm finishing with this subject now. And there's a really interesting one coming up, isn't there? I know Deontay Wilder also lacks certain things, which worries me in his fight against Luis Ortiz. Because I picked, for a reason, Eubank Jr. because I felt he was younger but fresher. And sort of was that way with Deontay Wilder. He's younger and maybe fresher than Luis Ortiz. But I'm going to be on tenterhooks watching that fight, because if Deontay Wilder does not tighten his punches up and start swinging wild against Luis Ortiz, he might not be outboxed, schooled, but this is the heavyweight division. He could literally be knocked clean out. And the thing is, I'm not saying that Luis Ortiz is the most sophisticated southpaw that we've ever seen in the history of boxing. But is Deontay Wilder used to seeing a southpaw at all, or a high-level one? A guy that can look ponderous one moment and the next minute you're on the floor. And there was a fight, I can't remember which it was, I think it was 2 fights ago. Deontay Wilder was kind of giving a show dance and posing whilst one guy was working his body on the inside. And Deontay Wilder was not tying him up. If Luis Ortiz gets there, there's trouble. One thing I did see, though, from Deontay Wilder in the first Stavern fight was a jab. And it at least went the distance, and he outboxed Stavern. I want to see some boxing from him. I want to see some boxing from Chris Eubank Jr. Because at the end of the day, people don't box for boxing's sake. That squared circle is not called the ring of the fight. It's called boxing. Boxing exists because it allows you to set things up. With boxing, with having a jab, a rangefinder, with having footwork, with being able to cut off a ring, with high guards, etc., however you want to cut it, these things exist for a reason. To set things up. A jab is not for nothing. A jab is either to win a fight on points, soften the guy up, or it's to set power punches up. Right? Against certain fighters of a low level, you don't have to set much things up. The more you go up the ladder, you have to start thinking about setting things up. It's a conundrum. It becomes mathematics then. And I don't mean your 1 times tables. It becomes your 12 timetables. So, let's see that stuff. Let's see an attempt of that stuff. I heard a boxer tell me once, and he's not really an elite fighter as such, but I was talking to him about boxing strategies, and he turned around and said, "Oh, that's only for elite fighters. Every boxer should be thinking strategy. I don't care what level you're at. You should be thinking of ways, whatever your best attribute is, you should be thinking of ways where you can set it up so it can benefit you most when you reach the highest levels." And I think Wilder has not done enough of this yet. I'm not saying Luis Ortiz beats him, but I'm on eggshells about this fight. I got a lesson at the weekend here. So I'm not as blasé with this prediction, shall we say. My inclination is still with Deontay Wilder, but I'm much more comfortable, I think, with Anthony Joshua beating Joseph Parker than I am with Wilder. See, I haven't even seen Wilder be hit by a guy of this level yet, Ortiz. Will he become more reckless if he gets really stunned? See, George Groves, to me, when there was a bit of fire from Eubank, he's tying people up now. He's adding more strings to his bow. This is what Wilder, and even Joshua, needs to work on certain things, in my opinion. This is what Wilder needs to do. It's certainly what Chris Eubank Jr. needs to do. Deontay Wilder actually is ahead in the fundamentals in terms of Eubank Jr., in my view. But boys, please, don't listen to the media all the time. Don't listen to me. Don't listen to the bookmakers. Don't listen to the hype. Go Humble yourself in the gym. Go talk smack in front of the cameras. It doesn't matter. But make sure you get them fundamentals down. It's not entertaining to watch. I'll tell you something. When you see an offensive fighter look so sloppy and missing by not even close. Sometimes I see real quality offensive fighters and they just about miss a shot and the crowd goes, ooh. But when you miss by miles like Eubank Jr. did, it is not entertaining. It's not even funny. It's tragic. It belittles the sport. I do like offensive fighters and it offends me when they look like that. It does. It's like somebody saying that they love great defensive fighters and then putting some guy in the ring who gets hit with every shot. You would feel offended, wouldn't you, as a fan of defensive fighters? It's no different when you see an offensive fighter just miss. It's not entertaining. It's reckless. It's crude. And as I said, it's tragic. But I can't stress fundamentals enough. They're important in life. Without the right foundation on the ground, your house will collapse no matter how good your attic looks. Or your dining room. It's as simple as that. And Eubank collapsed because he had no structure. So that's me. A quick look at Ortiz Wilder. I'll be making a prediction video soon. It's coming soon. But anyway, humbled, eaten pie, both me and Chris Eubank Jr. His dad was honest in the press conference. And he needs to be. Champions of Champions Boxing Talk. And I'm out, ladies and gentlemen.